If you clicked on this video, you know what this is about. I'll be starting with the first AP class I took in high school, and then going in sequential order. After that, I'll let some of my friends speak about other AP classes I did not take, and also read out some other testimonies from some more of my friends. Let's get right into it. AP US History was the first AP class I took during high school. I took it as a sophomore during the COVID year, and it kinda sucked. How my APUSH class was structured was that every single day, the entire year until the AP test, it would be a lecture over Zoom. We never did any projects or activities. It was just sit down, listen to the teacher, and take notes for 45 minutes for the entire year. I honestly don't have much of a problem with this type of class, but I know a lot of people do, and it also did not help that a lot of the notes we took were not even that useful. In order to do well on the test, you actually had to read the textbook and watch other teachers' YouTube videos because, despite the class being non-stop lectures, the teachers still did not go deep enough to prepare us for questions on the individual tests. We also never wrote any graded essays in the class, which I thought was pretty weird, as you write an essay on the actual AP test. The class did get easier over time, especially when we realized that the teacher got all of his questions from pre-existing AP tests. I ended up getting a 5 on the exam, and thought the test was pretty easy compared to the class. But still, this is definitely one of the hardest AP classes I took, and probably the hardest social sciences AP class, so I'm placing this in D tier. Next up is my junior year, where I took 5 AP classes. The first I'll talk about is AP Language and Composition. For me, AP Lang was baby easy. I think I got a 90 on the very first essay we wrote, and that ended up being the lowest grade I received all year. The class can be summed up as our teacher dissecting the rubric for the 3 essays on the AP test over the course of a whole year. And while it was pretty repetitive, it prepared me well for the AP test and I got a 5 on it. Also, despite us technically writing a lot of essays, it really was not a whole lot of work. I probably spent half of my time in the class talking to my friends or playing JavaScript Snake on my Chromebook. Compared to other English classes, the amount of reading you have to do is a lot smaller too. However, this is where you have to separate personal bias from objective ranking, and this is because, as you do in any English class, I had to peer review some of my classmates' essays, and there were times when I genuinely could not believe what I was reading. I was actually shocked that some of these kids managed to make it out of 8th grade with the level of writing they were at. It was not just that the evidence they used was bad or something. Some kids literally just had no idea how to explain any of their points. They would say, one reason communism is bad is because of the book 1984 by George Orwell, and refused to elaborate. I also know I got pretty lucky with my teacher, as the other AP Lang teachers at my school were harsher graders that did not prepare their students as well for the test. I would say that, overall, it is a solid B tier AP class. I still think the class is relatively simple, even if I did get lucky with a good teacher and my God-given essay writing abilities. All you really need to do is learn how to write 3 different types of essays in like 7 months, which is not that big of an ask. But again, if you aren't someone who takes a lot of APs, then you might run into some trouble. Moving on from AP Lang, we have AP Calculus BC. My school offers both AB and BC, but AB is not required to take BC, and since I'm kind of a smarty pants, I decided to go straight into BC. This ended up being the right decision, as like AP Lang, this class was also really easy. I was able to grasp a lot of the concepts quickly, I received almost exclusively A's, and I never really thought the class was moving too fast, despite it basically being 2 AP curriculums combined into 1 year. We even had 3 full weeks before the AP test, where we were done learning new material, and just studied for the AP test. I was also able to get most of my homework done in class, which is a huge plus. But, probably the best thing I can say about the class, is that our teacher gave us the AP curve on every test. If you're unaware, every AP exam massively curves their tests, so that you don't need a 90% to get a 5. Some classes, like Microeconomics and Psychology, don't have that big of a curve, so it does not really matter in the grand scheme of things. But, AP Calc has a 60% curve, meaning that you only need a 60% on the AP test to get a 5. Our teacher applied this curve to the in-class test, which meant you didn't have to stress over knowing 90% of the content. You could get away with only knowing 70% of the content, and still have a lot of room for error. Personally, I feel like more teachers should do this, even if the curve for the test is not that big, because the entire point of an AP class is to prepare for the AP exam. The rules of the class should follow the rules of the test. Overall, I would put Calc BC in the A tier, with the main logic behind displacement being that if you are good at math, then you will most likely succeed in this class. Obviously, if your math skills are shaky, you'll think the class is pretty hard, but if you aren't good at math, then just don't take an AP math class. Now we have AP Physics. This class I have by far the most to say about, and honestly deserves its own video. The first thing you need to know is that this is not AP Physics 1. Our school does not offer AP Physics 1 or 2, and instead throws you straight into AP Physics C, which is divided up into 2 separate classes, mechanics and then electricity and magnetism. I guess that 1 and 2 are not technically required to take Physics C, but I feel like it is strongly recommended, as C comes after 1 and 2. I also heard that this class was supposed to be the hardest at my school before I took it. However, I still took this class because physics was the science class I had most enjoyed throughout high school. I also thought its extreme difficulty would be comedically hilarious. I was not disappointed. This class is by far the hardest AP class I took in high school. A lot of the concepts, especially in E&M, you have no prior background knowledge for, and unlike something like economics, it is not very intuitive either. It certainly did not help that everyone technically skipped Physics 1 and 2, but there was not a single person in the class who honestly knew what they were doing. Some people were just more helpless than others. However, a lot of the issues in the class were due to our teacher, who was like 3 or 4 years out of college at the time. He was still getting used to teaching, and he taught super slowly. That sounds like a good thing at first, but he taught us so slowly that, with 10 days left until the AP test, we had not even started magnetism. He also was simply not very good at explaining a lot of the concepts in the class, and he missed a ton of school too for various reasons. The year after I had him, he missed almost the entire second week before the AP test because he was getting married, and he did not tell his students until the day he left. That pissed a lot of the kids in his class off, but I thought it was really funny since by then I was an AP Physics C alumni. The only real plus in the class is that he used a 60% curve like Calc BC, and that kept some people's grades afloat. Despite the extreme difficulty, I ended up getting an A both semesters, although I did get a C on the E&M final even with the curve. I also ended up getting double 4s on my AP test. Mechanics I was expecting a 4 because, outside rotational stuff, I actually did manage to learn most of the curriculum pretty well and was somewhat confident. But, E&M I was shocked at. I genuinely did not understand a single thing we learned after the first test. My only explanation as for why I did so well is because I took so many practice tests that I had subconsciously memorized answer patterns in the test and was able to make great guesses based on what a typical AP test is. There also was not a lot of magnetism, which saved me too. Overall, I'll give mechanics a D tier and E&M an F tier due to their extreme difficulty. Unless you know what you are in for and want to pursue a physics-related career, avoid this class and take APES or something instead. The last AP class I took my junior year was AP Government and Politics. My school has this as a 1-semester class, so I took it my second semester, so I could ease back into regular school after my COVID year, which I think was the right choice. This class was not very challenging, especially compared to APUSH. There was a lot more variety in the types of assignments and methods of learning material. There was also never a textbook we had to read, which was nice. But despite this, I still thought the class was pretty boring, and most of my time was spent waiting for the class to be over, so that I could play JavaScript Steak and AP Lang. I think we could have gone a little bit faster through the material too, since we had about a week left of content after the AP test. But I ended up getting a 5 anyway, so it did not really matter. Overall, it's a pretty standard social sciences class, and I would give it a B tier. Now we are going into my senior year, and first up we have AP Statistics. I thought that this class was slightly more challenging than calculus, as there was no AP curve even though the tests were still basically mini AP tests. There is also a lot more writing, and you can end up having to write entire paragraphs explaining a concept sometimes. But as I'm sure you have picked up by now, I'm kind of a genius, so those are no sweat. I also had a much better class compared to Calc, and probably half of my time spent in stats, I was doing things like wiggling a pencil up and down, so it appeared to be made of rubber. In that aspect, stats was a lot more fun than Calc, although I'm sure if the people in my classes switched, I would have said Calc was a lot more fun. As expected, I got a 5 on the AP test, and there's not really much else to say about stats. It's a pretty basic math-oriented class. If you're good at math like I am, then you should probably take it. But if you're not very good at math, then you should probably avoid it. Since it's a pretty easy class if you have the right skill sets for it, this class is going in the A tier. Next, we have AP Psychology. After AP Physics, I was not feeling another AP Science class, so I decided to forgo Science entirely and take this class instead. Psych is one of those AP classes that's so easy it almost becomes a negative. Objectively, it is nowhere near as hard as Physics or APUSH or even Calc, but because it has a reputation of being an easy AP class, it is easy to underestimate the class and end up falling behind. You also had to do a lot of textbook reading, although this was nowhere near as bad as APUSH. Our teacher also went a little slow, meaning we had to rush through the last 3 units. Despite all this, it is still a pretty fun AP class. You do a lot of in-class experiments, watch a lot of videos on random things that loosely connect to the class, and learn about a lot of weird things that you might otherwise never know about. I ended up getting a 5 on the test, which I honestly thought was probably the hardest one outside of AP Physics. The reason for this being the less generous curve that was around 75%. Also the fact that almost every question on the test asks about pretty specific information you cannot really figure out while taking the test. You either know it or you don't. Overall, I would give AP Psych a B tier. It is easier than most classes and it is also pretty interesting. There's also a lot of memorization and can become a big issue if you are not keeping up with the work. Finally, we have the last AP class I took in high school, which is AP Microeconomics. From what I've found online, it seems like most schools offer AP Macro first and then AP Micro, but my school does it in reverse for some reason. This class is also known at my school for being historically hard due to the teacher's horrendous reputation. Most kids take Micro their junior year, and I heard countless stories of the teacher being a jerk to students in class, constantly talking down to them, and literally causing students to start crying. So, going into the class, I was prepared to be fighting for my life. However, then I actually took the class, and it was surprisingly not that bad. It was more difficult in classes like Ling, Psych, and Gov, but by the end of the third unit, I had fallen into a good rhythm and was able to maintain a strong A and ended up getting a 5 on the test. And while there was quite a bit of textbook reading and other homework, I felt like it was actually good practice for the test and helped me learn the concepts better. It was also only a 1-semester class, so I did not have to worry about it for the whole year. The most surprising part about the class is that my teacher turned out to be fine. Outside of this one beef we had with a kid in my class who kept sleeping, which of course a teacher will get mad at you if you do that, he was pretty chill and was decent at teaching the material. Granted, everyone knew about his reputation, so no one ever wants to mess with him, except for Mr. Sleepy Pants, I guess. At the same time, I also knew some of the other students in the class were really struggling just like how my friends did the year before. Although from what I heard, this was probably because they're not actually doing any of the homework, which, again, that makes sense. For these reasons, I'm putting Micro in the C tier. It is more difficult than the average AP class, but as long as you are willing to put in the work, it should not be a whole lot of trouble. Now, I'll be letting some of my friends speak about the classes they took in high school. Starting off with my friend Evan, who will tell you about AP Calculus AB. This will be followed by Jacob, who will be talking about macroeconomics, and then Connor, who will tell you about 2D art and design. And lastly for this section, we have my friend who gave his opinion on AP biology. Let's get right into it.
This is it. The one, the only, the AP Calculus AB AP class. The one class to take to certify that you are a real math wizard. No more of that baby algebra or trigonomic mathematics. You're learning big boy lessons now. Normally taken senior year or junior year if you're a fast-paced nerd, this AP class will teach you all about derivatives, antiderivatives, and teach you the limits of the hospital, as well as the limits of your patients. AB takes a slower approach to learning calculus compared to the BC counterpart, making it a much more attractive option. I personally took AB Calc while also taking AP Physics C, so going from using calculus in a physics setting 6th period to just doing calculus 7th made the AB curriculum much easier. Even if I didn't take AP Physics at the same time, I would say that the AB class is great at teaching you everything you need to know for the test, especially because you have more time to learn each unit in AB compared to BC. I mean, AB does have half the lessons to learn. Easy A tier pick. Anyone who has done all the math up to pre-calc going into their senior year should 100% take the AB class and test.
Macroeconomics is a really interesting course and a great addition to your portfolio of social studies classes. Unless you go to our school. First, we are forced to take micro before macro. Now, I'm not sure if this is customary, but when I asked friends from other schools, many stated they had to take macro as a prerequisite to micro. In my opinion, this makes way more sense. Simple yet important topics like supply and demand or scarcity are much easier to understand on a larger scale. Also, the teacher we had, as Bruhlie mentioned earlier, is not very good. And as someone who is majoring in econ, this was very frustrating, as this was a class that actually pertained to what I wanted to study. However, those are simply my personal experiences, and in general, the class isn't too difficult. The reason a bad teacher can make it so difficult is because econ is unlike many other classes. It draws a weird line between math, social science, and business, concepts which are often split into completely different departments. So one advantage is you might learn something that is actually useful. For example, towards the end of the year, we explored stock markets and index funds, and our teacher took some time to tell us how we can invest to save for retirement. The test for macro is also trivial. It was laughably easy, but if you need help studying for the AP test or any unit test, I would just watch videos made by Jacob Clifford. They are straightforward and entertaining, and no one can make some of the harder concepts simple like he can. In terms of rankings, I would give this class a B. With a good teacher, A or F.
My name's Connor, and I took AP Photo my senior year. AP Photo was a category in the AP 2D Art and Design course. You were supposed to have an inquiry for the course of the whole semester, such as how lighting and shadows can affect your image. I technically started my senior year in Photo Studio for about 2 weeks, but I moved up to AP Photo because I was wanting to do the highest level, as I was already planning to pursue film in the future. The problem with this class is that it was first period and blended some days, so everyone was always tired and just waking up, and people such as myself put off some assignments until last minute because we were able to. All pictures and photo shoots were pretty much supposed to be done outside of class, because in class is where we would review each other's work and edit pictures. Throughout the year, we would add some of our best pictures to a slideshow, so we would be able to just copy and paste the pictures and information we wrote about the pictures straight onto the AP website's turn-in. When I realized I could just put off doing the work until near the end of the year, when that final turn-in date was, some other kids also realized, and we were all in the same boat together. But in the last month leading up to the end, I kind of realized that had screwed me over because everyone was just scrambling to get their photo shoots done. And the possibility for procrastination was infinite, but that did just make it more stressful near the end of the year. And I've come to the conclusion that as long as you had 15 photo shoots by the end of the year, you would easily pass the class, and hopefully you would have some good enough pictures from those photo shoots to turn into the College Board, which was actually the end goal all along. This class is honestly C tier because there isn't a solid structure. It's just that the whole point was to have 15 finished works to turn into the College Board at the end of the year.
As a certified taker of the 2023 AP Biology test, I can say without a doubt that this determinant of scientific college credit is only deserving of the D tier at the maximum. Now, why is this test so low? High schools tell us that these courses are worthy of being accredited university-level difficulty, that they're meant to challenge us and push our intellect to the very limit. And yet during the duration of this course, I did not feel 1 ounce of a challenge at all, not a single modicum of difficulty. Not once did I, as an AP class taker, study in any material at all for this class outside of mandated times allotted by our teacher to do so. And not once did I, as an AP class taker, use a provided retake during my lunch period for this class. I ended this class with an A, above an A in fact, a 101 because of the limitless extra credit opportunities we had been provided. This is not a summary provided by a bitter student who did not receive the grade they wanted. I scored a 4 in the AP Biology test, the exact score I desired and the score my chosen university desired. This is a summary provided by a student that believes this course did not live up to the expectation of the stress-inducing, mental health-degrading, suicidal thought-provoking college course that the high schools make this out to be. The test itself was one of the easiest tests I have ever taken in my life. Some scenarios brought up by the test were simple things that anyone with a brain cell and a can of Red Bull could reason through. The multiple choice section, while several problems long, were essentially just a bundle of 5 problems split up into 70. This disparity prevented me from using the full range of my AP Biology knowledge, and instead only called upon knowledge learned in the second semester of my senior year. And the writing section was even easier, with me answering every question with at least 15 minutes to spare, and me ending the entire writing session half an hour early. All in all, the only thing I am giving this class credit for, and preventing it from dropping to the lowest, deepest recesses of the F tier, is the fact that I did in fact get my desired score.
Before I read out some more written testimonies, there is one AP class at my school I was unable to find anyone to talk about. And that is literally because only 2 kids in my entire school took the class. This was AP French. I am not sure what it is about French class, but it seems to be almost universally agreed that French is always worse than Spanish. And from what I heard from the 2 students, this class was no exception. The teachers were worse, there were a lot more stupid assignments, and, living in America, learning French is simply not as useful as learning Spanish. While I never took the class, I am very confident in saying that it deserves an F tier. Just take Spanish instead. There is technically another AP test that is offered at my school, and that is AP Comparative Government. However, my school does not actually offer the class AP Comparative Government. Instead, there is an international relations class that is advanced level, and some of the curriculum overlaps with the AP class. However, it's not a lot. In order to actually have any hope of passing the test, you have to do a lot of self-studying. I didn't know any kids who actually took the Comp Gov test, although from what I heard, there were still more kids taking it than AP French. It also just does not really seem like that useful of a class when compared to other, more general social science classes. So I feel somewhat confident placing this class in D tier. There are simply better options for social science AP classes. Now, I have a few more classes to rank whose testimonies are written by some more of my friends who could not record their part. First is my friend Mark, who wrote about AP Chemistry, and he will be followed up by Y7 aka Theo, who wrote about AP Computer Science A. On Chemistry, Mark said, "Really did not have the privilege, or perhaps was lucky, not to take this class, but here is a review from a credible Bruhlie contributor. AP Chem was a rather difficult class, quickly speeding up as the year moved on. Our school's teacher jumped around the curriculum to schedule the harder units during the first semester, so we would at least learn the big units if we were on a big time crunch towards the AP test. The content was rather difficult and harder than AP Biology in my, and any other sane student's opinion. There was a great deal of math and calculations involved with some units that were straightforward. However, some other units like the acid-base unit were almost purely guesswork and a major challenge to say the least. While our class did have a few students who excelled and did very well, generally speaking, this class is harder than most others, which is backed up by the AP test results. Don't get me wrong, there are many fun labs throughout the year, and with a good lab table, this can be an excellent class to goof off with friends, as there's a lot of independent work time. However, the only thing that's guaranteed is the amount of work involved. For these reasons, this class is going into C tier. Now originally, this is where I was going to read out a part from my friend Y7 aka Theo about the AP Computer Science A, but this assignment proved to be too much of a challenge for him, so I am just going to try to rank it myself. From what I heard from Theo and other people, this class is objectively one of the easier AP classes, especially if you already have some background in computer programming. A lot of the curriculum is surface level or beginner stuff. However, the class's lack of difficulty is often a detriment, similar to AP Art. The class is often pretty boring, and there are a lot of weird, pointless assignments only given to take up time. Whenever I bring up the class to Theo, he always goes on a rant about how both the teacher and the AP test made the kids write out code on a piece of paper instead of actually on a computer, which, while obviously ridiculous, is something that is probably going to be changed if it hasn't already. The class also seems to have a reputation of attracting a lot of unsavory people, to put it lightly. Overall, this class deserves a C tier. While it is generally easy, it's also pretty boring and does not teach you very much if you're already familiar with the computer programming taught in the class. Next up, we have my friend Zuckjuice, aka Eli, who covered a plethora of AP classes, and I'll now read his part. What is up, Bruhlie Nation? I'm a friend of Bruhlie, and I'm also qualified to talk about AP classes, since my AP Superscore is higher than his. Since Bruhlie is a baby, he chose not to take AP Human Geography, so I'm coming in to save the day. Going into our freshman year, our middle school advertised AP Hug as an intense course that is on another level from any other social science course you've ever taken. However, I am happy to report it is one of the easiest AP courses of them all. The class is almost entirely memorizing vocab, so if that is not your strong suit, I would not recommend it. And while the material is not very hard, it is one of the few classes where I still had to read from a textbook. Our teacher was also a silly guy, but looking back, I don't think he even knew the content of the course. I remember we spent a week learning the difference between creolization and syncretism, and it still was never explained properly. I took the AP test in 2020, where the test format only included 3 free response questions and no multiple choice questions. I persevered and got a 5 because I'm also a genius. AP Hug is a great starter AP class and a great way to begin feeding College Board all of your money. For that reason, it goes in the B tier. Buckle in, Bruhlie Nation. Next up, we have the GOAT of AP classes, AP Environmental Science. When thinking about the best AP class, this is the one that clearly stands above the rest. Our high school described all of the AP Science classes as having roughly the same difficulty. This could not be further from the truth. APES consist of only the most important work. Our teacher gave us fill-in-the-blank notes for every unit, so the class was almost entirely memorization. While a science class like AP Chemistry may have you do a lab mixing chemicals, in APES we mined chocolate chips out of cookies using toothpicks. During every unit, we had practice quizzes that had College Board type questions, such as what type of energy do we get from the sun? A. Nuclear, B. Solar, C. Geothermal, or D. Hydroelectric. In addition, because of our school's grading system, it was essentially possible to get a C without getting a single question right on any test. but I suspect even someone with no prior environmental science knowledge could guess correctly on 75% of the questions. If you are looking for an easy A and easy college credit, I would recommend taking APES, as it is possibly the easiest AP class of them all. For all of those reasons, APES is our sole S-tier course. Buenos dias mis aficionados de Bruhlie. Next up is AP Spanish Language and Composition. In our school district, AP Spanish is the 5th year of Spanish, since we can start taking Spanish in 8th grade. Bruhlie somehow scraped by the first 4 years with all A's, even without knowing the language at all, but he sadly gave up and decided not to take AP Spanish. My AP Spanish class was really funny, because while in previous years we had structured learning of vocab and grammar, my teacher did not seem to have a curriculum at all. The only time we learned new vocabulary was when he randomly thought of a word and told us to write it down. By Spanish 2, we were expected to talk in Spanish the whole time, but in AP Spanish, our teacher would talk in English about a quarter of the time. Aside from not really learning anything, the class was really fun, and we spent a lot of time goofing off. Instead of learning Spanish, we would play frisbee and do relay races. Somehow, someway, our whole class passed the AP test, and I got a 4. This class deserves a C tier, because I really didn't learn any Spanish, but it was still fun. If you already have a good grasp of Spanish, I recommend taking this class, as it is useful for getting out of language classes in college. Finally, ending this video is Alicia, who wrote about her time in AP English Literature and AP European History. On AP Lit, she said, AP Lit was one of the 5 AP classes I took my senior year. I decided to take AP Lit because many of my senior friends encouraged me to take the class. To my surprise, I ended up having the same enjoyment for the class. The curriculum the teacher used was not an AP curriculum, but one that he created. The class was based around the idea of quality, and what it means to have a quality life and career. The books we read connected quality to different religions, philosophies, racial communities, socioeconomic statuses, etc. In regards to the workload, we read 3 books per semester and had 1 week to read each one. Then, we had a week of discussion for the book, followed by an assignment, some form of essay or group project. There were also ongoing projects sprinkled in throughout the semester. Examples of assignment we did were partner-timed essays, improving a ChatGPT essay, and creating a lesson plan based on a book we had just read. There were plenty of other interesting ones as well. While I did not take the test for AP Lit, a large chunk of the class was dedicated to mastering the timed essays. The prompts for these essays were definitely more complex than AP Lang. For example, one essay I wrote required me to explain how the author developed a certain theme throughout the book, and then connect the book to a given quote. While these essays became easier with time, I almost always struggled with the evidence section. To me, Lit essays required a lot more different subpoints in comparison to Lang essays, therefore requiring a lot more evidence to build on top of each other. My close friends in the class received a mix of 4s and 5s. The test is not that difficult. Even though this class was my favorite class in high school, I can understand that people have a large disconnect with the type of work and books we had to read. This class belongs in C tier. AP Euro was another AP class that I took my senior year. I decided to take Euro because I needed an AP Social Science, and I knew it would be less work than Psych. As a history person, I enjoyed the content of the course, but I was not a large fan of the curriculum the teacher had set up. He had very long lectures with many projects sprinkled in, of which included journal entries, digital notebook, and roleplay simulations. The teacher would consistently give extensions for the projects, and almost always ended up pushing them back to due date, which added to my boredom for the course. Due to it being a lower priority class for me, I usually received a B or C on the test. However, when I actually studied for the final, I only missed 3 questions. The class is very easy and understandable if you put the work in. However, it was not a class that required a lot of attention from me. Additionally, I did not take the AP test for the class. The SAQs for the course are very manageable, but I'll definitely say the DBQ is more difficult. The multiple choice section probably depends on the person. I did not know what other people in my class got, but due to the lax nature of the curriculum our teacher had, I did not expect many 5s. I would place this in the B tier because it is a fairly easy class, but it can become very boring pretty quickly. And that concludes the AP class tier list. There are a few more AP classes I did not cover because they are not offered at my school, but most of them did not seem very popular, and I think you can kind of guess where they would go. To end this video, I want to say that, despite this entire video basically being me and my friends glorifying AP classes and openly bragging about our success, you really do not need to take any AP classes in high school. This is not just because these classes are generally hard, although that is part of it. I am fortunate enough that my skill set perfectly fit the mold for a good AP student. I am great at time management, my family is wealthy enough to pay for all of these classes, and I barely did any extracurriculars in high school, meaning I had a lot of free time. On the other hand, I have heard of so many stories both online and in my real life, of kids who take all AP classes, along with doing 3 or more extracurricular activities, and also somehow trying to balance a healthy family, social, and emotional life on top of that. Some of these kids are successful, but most seem miserable and completely stressed out. You should not be taking an AP class if it is causing you to have mental breakdowns, panic attacks, or stay up until 2 in the morning studying. A single class is not worth that amount of stress. I don't think I ever stayed up past 10 o'clock at night working on any assignment in high school, and very rarely did I study after 9. As I said before, I am very lucky that all these classes worked out for me, but that's also kind of the entire point. Not everyone is lucky. Very few people can handle an extremely busy or rigorous schedule in high school. It is much more beneficial to take classes that fit you and your schedule compared to taking classes because you think it'll give you the best chance of getting into a good school, even if it means taking mainly base level classes. Not everyone can get into Harvard, but even more people should not go to Harvard. At the end of the day, there are much more important things in high school class selection. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, probably don't subscribe, because I'll never make a video like this again. See you in the next video.